Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling the engine room of any successful business, the Salesforce. We're going deep into the critical framework you need, from how you structure your teams to, well, the legal stuff you face, to build a really powerful, profitable sales organization.
Yeah, and this is more than just a hiring chat. Staffing, I mean, getting the right people at any level, it's arguably the single most important thing a manager does. You really can't afford to just, rely on instinct or what feels right.
Mm,
The sources are clear. Selection needs objective criteria because, honestly, the stakes are incredibly high.
absolutely. So for you, our listener, our goal today is to give you that objective roadmap, the strategic framework, the changing skills needed, and the best practices to hire what the research calls the right people, the ones who actually drive revenue.
hmm
Okay, let's start right at the foundation, that basic organizational puzzle. How do you structure your reps? Specialists? Focused on one thing? Or are they generalists? We saw this exact dilemma, didn't we, with that Excel Tools Inc. case study.
Oh, yeah. Excel tools face this head on. So, on one side, their main competitor had specialized forces, teams divided by customer type or product line. That approach, well, it often sounds good on paper, but it immediately adds complexity, and it really increases the burden on the regional managers in their current system.
Right. But then you had Charles Webster's counterproposal, which sounded pretty logical, generalization. He basically argued, why pay the high cost of specialization? Just give each rep a smaller geographical area and have them sell everything, both portable and stationary tools, to all customer types in that zone.
Exactly. His core argument was all about efficiency. Webster felt the products and the customer needs just weren't different enough to justify the complexity and the overhead of separate teams. And remember, that structural choice, it immediately cascades down. If they went specialized, Excel then had to figure out, okay, do we have one regional manager over all the groups, or do we need separate managers for each specialized team?
And what I found really interesting was that kind of hybrid idea. Keep the generalist sales force, but maybe support them with, like, product managers or customer group managers working in a staff role. So it wouldn't sell directly, but they'd plan the promotions, the merchandising. It just shows how the org chart really defines the whole system.
Okay, but once you define that system, once you decide if you need generalists covering a wide patch or specialists laser focused, you immediately see how, wow, hiring the wrong person for that specific role is just catastrophic. Why does selection need so much more focus than, say, training or budgeting?
It really comes down to the dollars involved, the cost. If you look at the actual expense of recruiting and selection for just a beginning salesperson, it can easily shoot past $100,000. And that's before they even start being productive. Now, if that person leaves after, say, 18 months or just doesn't cut it, that $100,000, gone. Poof. You've wasted the investment, plus you've got the opportunity cost from all the sales they didn't make. It's brutal. That context really makes that famous Ross Perot quote hit home. Eagles don't flock. You have to find them one at a time. You're not just filling a slot. You are actively hunting for high-value talent, and that hunt has to be strategic.
And that strategy, it needs to be perfectly aligned with your market goals. It has to be. For instance, if your company's plan is all about maintaining existing accounts, deep service, relationship building, you need a fundamentally different type of salesperson than a company that's all about aggressive new account hunting. The profiles just don't match up.
Exactly. Or think about your promotion pipeline. If the plan is to grow future execs from the sales ranks, well then, hiring highly paid, older, experienced reps who might just be looking to cruise toward retirement, that could actively undermine your long-term strategic goal. It just doesn't fit.
It's all interconnected, you see. If you decide, okay, we're going to hire people straight out of college, then you absolutely must be ready to invest in a solid, immediate training program. The selection choice dictates pretty much every management effort that comes after it.
Okay, so the strategy's set. We know what kind of person we need. Generalist, hunter, farmer, whatever. The next step is actually profiling that ideal candidate. Job analysis, job description, and then job qualifications.
Right. The first two, job analysis and description, they're pretty mechanical. You can map those out. But the third one, figuring out the qualifications, that's the real headache. It's tough because the research is pretty clear. There just isn't one single universally accepted magic profile for sales success that works across every single selling job or industry. It doesn't exist.
But there are characteristics that seem generally desirable, right? Like ego strength, that sense of urgency, ego drive, assertiveness, sociability, being willing to take risks, those classic traits.
Those are the classics, yes. But here's where things get really interesting now, because those classic traits, they're kind of under threat. The requirements are fundamentally shifting, mainly because of the huge growth in team selling. Team selling now makes up something like 20 to 30% of all sales activity. That's a big chunk.
That is huge. And it means traits we used to celebrate in sales, like fierce independence, self-sufficiency, needing personal control, those might actually be a handicap now in this new setup.
Precisely. The modern sales environment needs adaptability, a real willingness to share credit and information, and the ability to consistently put the group's goal first. What the sources call selfless behavior. This focus on fitting into a team is so different. I mean, when Anderson Consulting, now Accenture, looked at their sales consultants, they found students who had part-time jobs and extracurricular activities were actually more likely to succeed than candidates with just high GPAs. They had to totally rethink their selection criteria to prioritize that collaborative experience. It was revolutionary for them.
Okay, so once you've defined that maybe new profile, the hunt starts. And that means navigating the legal side of things. Sales managers have to be absolutely crystal clear on non-discrimination versus affirmative action. They aren't the same.
Right. Non-discrimination is the baseline. It means you don't discriminate based on age, race, religion, sex, disability, etc., and you actively eliminate any existing conditions in your workplace that are discriminatory. Basically, you're making sure your system is neutral.
But affirmative action, that asks for more, doesn't it? It requires employers to make additional proactive efforts.
Yeah.
Efforts to actually recruit, employ, and promote qualified people from groups that have historically been shut out of those jobs. It's about positive steps.
Exactly. And this isn't just like a legal footnote or ancient history. It's driven by today's demographic reality. The U.S. workforce is changing fast. Look at the projections. Workers of Hispanic origin are set to grow by 36%, Asian and other ethnic origins by 37%, Black non-Hispanic workers by 17%. Now compare that to white non-Hispanic workers. Their growth is projected at only 6%. The workforce is diversifying rapidly.
Wow, those numbers are stark. And that shift brings us straight to that famous Majestic Plastics Company case. Management there was, genuinely proud of their low turnover. They had 14 white men and 4 white women as sales reps. Pretty stable team. But then federal compliance officers showed up asking why they had basically no minorities in any supervisory, sales, or managerial jobs.
Yeah, and the compliance folks came prepared. They had evidence, dossiers showing that the company did have qualified minority candidates right there in the local area. Candidates they just weren't hiring or promoting. And the company president's final thought in that case really sums up the seriousness. Life could get mighty unpleasant for us if we don't. You have to be proactive, not just reactive.
And we still see big gaps today, don't we? Like, women make up half the total labor force, but you rarely see them making up more than, say, 25% of an outside sales force. Managers are literally leaving qualified talent untapped if they aren't actively recruiting from that huge pool.
Okay, so given the high cost we talked about, the clear link to strategy, and these legal and demographic forces, recruiting can't just be something you do when there's a fire. You need continuous, proactive recruiting, right? Even when you don't have an immediate opening. The time to recruit is before you need someone.
Absolutely. You have to keep that pipeline, that funnel, full all the time. There's a useful rule of thumb. A recruiting effort might reach maybe 20 qualified people, but out of those 20, you might only end up hiring 1. So that volume means you need a smart sourcing strategy.
Right. Let's quickly run through the main sources people use. Employee referrals seem really popular, often preferred because the person referring knows the job, knows the culture. Dr. Pepper 7-Up, for example, apparently gets 40% of its new hires this way. Sometimes they even pay bonuses for it. Referrals are great. Current employees are another good low-cost source. It can be a real reveal booster, too. Moving into sales is often seen as a promotion. General Motors use that approach effectively. Then you have competitors, poaching. The pro is obvious. They already know the market, the product. Less training needed, maybe. But the con is, well, first, the ethical question of pirating, and second, it can be really hard to get someone established, maybe highly paid, to unlearn their old ways of doing things.
And then, of course, there's the internet. Job boards, company sites. It's cheap for gathering lots of resumes. Microsoft apparently gets like 500 a week. But that just shifts the cost, doesn't it? The company then has to spend a ton of time and resources sorting through that massive pile, screening them all.
It does, and this actually brings us to what I think is maybe the most critical disconnect in this whole recruiting process. It seems recruiters often break the #1 rule of selling know your customer when they're trying to attract applicants. We have data showing what recruiters think students want versus what students actually say they prioritize.
Oh yeah, that assumption versus reality gap is pretty stunning. Recruiters thought students cared most about, like the training program, advancement opportunities, and maybe the recruiter's own morale or enthusiasm. But the students themselves, they ranked job satisfaction, fit with their personal goals, and recruiter morale as their top three. The recruiters totally missed the importance of satisfaction and personal alignment.
Exactly. So the takeaway for you listening is really clear. Your recruiters need to be flexible. They need to stop just selling the salary number and the vague promise of advancement someday. Instead, they need to tailor the pitch. Emphasize things like company stability and actual job satisfaction, because that's what many modern candidates are really looking for. Know your audience.
Wow. We've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We've seen how his initial organizational choices dictate costs and personnel needs, how this modern sales environment demands a real shift towards selfless team players, and why legal compliance isn't just a rulebook thing, it's directly tied to managing the changing face of the workforce.
And the central point just keeps coming back. Selection is the most vital managerial activity. It just is. And since we know continuous recruiting and constantly evaluating your sources are absolutely essential for success, let's leave you with this final challenge to think about. Given this crucial and expensive shift towards team selling that we discussed, if you were starting a brand new high-tech sales company today, what single metric beyond just sales volume would you put right at the top of your recruiting evaluation matrix, like in Figure 5 from the sources, to ensure you're getting long-term success with team players? Would you prioritize the cost per hire from a source? Or maybe the rep's actual performance after 2 years? Or perhaps the percentage of reps you retain from that source after 3 years? Which metric do you think best guarantees you're finding those collaborative team players, not just the lone eagles of the past? Something to chew on.